So this session will be with Mr. Darryl Long, Managing Director of Ubisoft Singapore and Philippines.
Hi, Annette.
Hello. So similarly for the others, we have
Hi.
some questions prepared for you that we prepped before this session. The question is the crunch culture in the gaming industry true?
I think we've all seen the news recently about the video game industry and some of the things that are happening, and I think it's important for us as an industry to acknowledge these things and start talking about them. I won't speak for the entire video game industry, but I will speak for my experience at Ubisoft and what I've seen in my 18 plus years working there. There's definitely been a movement over the last several years towards work-life balance and creating an environment where people can do the work that they're passionate about without necessarily having to push themselves too far.
Game development is only for programmers. Is this true?
The difference between video games and the rest of the entertainment industry is video games are the one that allow the player to tell their own story.
Yes, wow,
Right.
Definitely.
You know, we create a game world, we create game systems and an environment for the players to fall into and let them build their own story as they play. And that makes it so much more real, so much more personal when you're the one who's deciding how the story will go and how you move through this virtual game world. And that goes beyond technology. That's not just a technology industry. That's the confluence of art and technology together.
You don't need a degree to make games.
So the video game industry is very much about agility. We say sometimes that we're all entrepreneurs in the video game industry because there is no set plan for a video game. We're always inventing as we go. We're always pushing the boundaries and trying to do new things. So the number one ability or talent that we want people to have is the ability to innovate, to adapt quickly. And that's true for every video game industry employee. We are all learning continuously because the industry is constantly changing. The technology we use is changing. The standard of what a video game is constantly changing. Business models are changing. We adapt constantly.
You have to be a gamer to work in the video game industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting question because now it's actually harder and harder to find people who aren't gamers. I mean, there's more than 2 billion gamers out there in the world right now. And more people are casual gamers that just, you sit on the MRT and you play a game for 15 minutes or something. And that happens more and more. But of course, it is like any industry, there's specialists. The people that really focus on games, and that's a lot of our game designers, of course, have a very broad knowledge of the video game industry and what's out there. But again, it's more than knowing the industry. It's more than being a gamer. It's about that creativity. You can't just duplicate the games that are already out there. And sure, some companies, they follow a formula, or some video game companies are risk averse. But for us, staying at the front of the industry means always bringing innovation. If you look at Assassin's Creed, as an example, it's an established brand.
I've heard of that, even though I'm not a gamer. Yeah,
Okay.
Assassin's Creed.
Ubisoft Singapore has worked on, I think at this point, 10 Assassin's Creed games over the years. And if you look at the difference between the first Assassin's Creed to like Assassin's Creed Black Flag to Assassin's Creed Origins and then Valhalla, they're all so different while still protecting that core of what makes the game so special. But innovating constantly and always pushing the boundaries. So we need people that are creative, that can come up with these new ideas. And often that comes from a story. That it's the story in a lot of ways that will drive the experience and really push what the game is to the next level.
Being a gaming publisher, does Ubisoft only hire young candidates? How about citizens in the late 40s with a wealth of experience?
I think that question, in a way, comes from the fact that it is still a very young industry. The video game industry really got started in the 80s and came into its own in the 90s. So even people that grew up playing video games and then came into the industry, they're still maybe 20 years into their career and nowhere near retirement age. So from that perspective, it does feel like the video game industry is young. But I've seen that we developers in video games are getting older, having families as well, and growing up in the same way that our players are getting older and growing up. Now the average age of a video gamer is over 30. Now it's much more about do you have the passion for video games? Do you want to create art? Do you have the foundational skills to be able to come in and learn on the job and the agility to adapt to a constantly moving industry? And if the answer to all that is yes, then absolutely, it doesn't matter how old you are.
What do you think about the statement of a game developer being similar to a movie director?
Video games are so different from movies in a sense. We do tell a story, but again, it's the player's story and the player telling their own story in the game. So there is an element of, as a video game developer, that you're creating something that people get to experience. Where it's different, though, is because you can't control what the player is going to do. At least that's not a game that gives the player a lot of agency to decide their own story. Where some of the similarities come, though, I mean, especially in Ubisoft games, we have these, characters, these charismatic characters that you get to have moments with, and we do create scenes with lighting and movement and dialogue and everything. So we're telling a lot of our story through these moments, and that is similar to being a movie director in some ways.
To do a career switch over to work in the gaming industry, what are some of the advice you would provide?
As a young industry and as a very rapidly growing industry, I think a lot of people will be asking that question. So I actually did move into video games from outside. I was working in the finance industry before that. Yeah, and I decided to go into video games because I wanted to do something that was actually fun. I had a lot of the core skills that were necessary to work in the video game industry, but I was able to learn quickly, and it's because I had a very open mind and I was ready to learn. I was able to accept that this is a whole new industry. I'm going to be learning new things every day. Some people do find it very intimidating to switch careers or to switch industries, no matter what age or level they're at. My advice then really is just be ready to learn. Coming into the video game industry, you need to have an open mind. You got to be ready for doing something a bit differently and be ready to challenge yourself. Be ready to tap into your creativity in a way that you never have before and allow that to shine.
So the question is, does story and quality matter in video game development, or does only formula matter?
Well, they're both very important, actually, but for sure, story and quality rules the day at Ubisoft. We always put priority on innovating on every game that we do, and investing in the story and the experience that the player will have. And I think that's what keeps moving the industry forward, is constantly pushing the bounds of of how you tell a story in a video game and how the player tells their own story in a video game.
Thank you so much, Darryl. I felt like this was such a nice time where you could share so much intriguing, eye-opening information with us about the gaming industry. And I'm sure many of you guys, whether you're online or offline with us, I'm sure you learned a lot of interesting things about the gaming industry behind the screen and behind your games. So thank you, Darryl, for joining us. Thank you so much. And let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.